A few weeks ago, I was shooting hoops at a local park in my chill European village when a young guy in his 20s struck up a conversation with me, and I ended up making a new friend. Now, as a lot of you have commented and noticed, although I'm 35 now, I look, sound, and generally seem much younger. So when I told him my real age, he asked if it wasn't too weird for me to have a much younger friend who's still in his early 20s. And my response was that not only do I not care at all, but I'm actually way more likely to get along with and relate to someone of his age than someone of my own generation. Now, this isn't going to surprise any of you who watch me. Heck, my whole channel is about being the millennial defense lawyer for Gen Z, but I think what will surprise you are the specific reasons for this. Since 2020, it feels like we've been in this weird twilight zone time-wise. You see, the general conventional wisdom is that you should respect your elders because they're oh so old and wise. They have so much more life experience than you, and they know so much more than you, and that you're just a naive, ignorant kid who doesn't know how the world works. And we'll get into this a bit more later, but this narrative is ultimately nothing more than a dirty and manipulative tactic to uphold the status quo and keep exploiting the youth for cheap slave labor. Not to mention, it's just flat out not true. I mean, boomers have single-handedly proven that age does not equal wisdom, experience, or intelligence, which is why just about all their advice on literally everything is such dog shit. But alas, this video is not about boomers. We've spent plenty of time bashing them in literally every other video, and I think everyone gets the point by now. This video is about my own generation, the Millennials, and why we just couldn't quite ignite the revolutionary changes the way Gen Z is doing right now, and why that's just so frustrating, because we could have already been living in a much better world right now if we had even half the balls of Gen Z. You see that twilight zone we're living in which I mentioned earlier? It feels like since 2020, the wisdom-age correlation has actually been totally reversed. The oldest generation, the boomers, are by far and away easily the most immature and naive generation. Gen X is quite an interesting mixed bag, too much so to really broadly characterize. And millennials are somewhat finally starting to get it now, but it took them a hell of a long time, and a lot of them are still looking at the world through painfully naive and childish rose-tinted glasses. And then we have Gen Z, the generation starting revolutions, exposing the broken system, fully cognizant and aware of just how bullshit everything is. And it really feels like the entire fate of the universe is in the hands of the generation that should be spending their youth partying away without a care in the world right now. It's not fair and it's not right. But unfortunately, that's where we are now today due to how complacent millennials were. We've done a lot of interesting historical deep dives on this channel to debunk this naive and childish boomer narrative that we should be grateful because we have it better than anyone in human history. We've talked about how hunter-gatherers worked only 2 to 3 hours per day, how a lot of Roman slaves lived better than Gen Z minimum wage workers today. And it feels weird to say this, but the millennial era of the 2000s and the 2010s is technically history now too. And once you fully understand the past and how it connects to the modern day, this is how we'll ultimately figure out how to create a better society and a better future. I want to make one thing very clear. The general tone of this video is going to be quite critical and harsh towards millennials, but it comes from a place of well-intentioned tough love. You see, millennials are still quite a young generation, all things considered, and some of them are finally starting to get it now. And with how revolutionary Gen Z has been, if our generation can finally grow up and get its shit together enough to support them, I promise you, a much better post-boomer world and future can be waiting for us. When my new friend asked me why I could relate to people his age better than my own generation, the answer was very simple. Talking to Gen Z actually feels like a serious grown adult conversation, whereas talking to millennials feels like a hollow small talk performance because they're just not ready to have a serious adult conversation yet. Sure, when it comes to shallow pop culture stuff, it's easier to talk to a fellow millennial about special moments from the 90s and 2000s. the golden age of hip hop, the Kobe and Shaq Lakers, how everyone was playing Pokemon and Magic cards back then. But if you want to actually have a serious conversation about anything that actually matters, it feels literally impossible. Anytime you try to bring up a serious issue that actually impacts our day-to-day life, the economy, politics, the state of the world, and what's at stake for our futures, millennials will typically deflect to some form of shallow, politically correct answer to just avoid the issue entirely because it's uncomfortable. Oh, I don't want to get into politics. Oh, I'm just trying to live my own life. There's nothing we can do to change the world anyways. And here's the thing, these shallow, comfortable, politically correct answers are not a bad thing in and of themselves, but it all depends on the environment and context. Boomers, for example, when they're not being the narcissistic gaslighting assholes they are, of course, are also for the most part like this. But it was okay for them to be like that because they lived in literally the best economy and the best time to be alive in the history of the world. When things for the most part are going that well, there's really no need to have these tough, uncomfortable conversations. There's no need to try to radically fix or change the system because, well, if it ain't broke, then why fix it? Why have a serious and potentially very unsettling conversation about the problems with the economy if, well, there's not really any problems with the economy to begin with? If, however, you're coming of age in an environment when the world and the system are rapidly collapsing in on not just you, but your entire generation and the next generation as well, you can no longer afford to just have good vibes, shallow conversations about sports, music, pop culture, etc. You must be willing to have uncomfortable and unsettling conversations about serious, deep issues. Otherwise, none of this other stuff even matters. That being said, the cataclysmic 2008 financial crash and all its aftershock effects did hit millennials so hard that we eventually did get pushed into a position where we had to discuss solutions at some point. It just became inevitable. And this is where things get extremely ridiculous when it comes to us millennials, because you see, while the advice and solutions we came up with certainly weren't as bad as boomers, it definitely wasn't even remotely helpful at all either. Not even 1%. Every, and I do mean every single millennial solution can be boiled down to a premise of one simple sentence. Don't solve the problem. Just become a part of the problem instead. I've recently started to grind ranked Marvel Rivals, and I've been watching a lot of high rank player replays to learn how to play better myself. I came across a pretty good channel for this, and I searched for replays of the rank 1 rogue player as I'm a rogue main myself. These are the results that popped up, and something is very, very wrong with this picture. I'll give you 5 seconds to see if you can spot what it is. If you notice that there are somehow 7 different rank 1 players, you would be correct. Now, no shade to this channel at all. Every YouTuber, including myself, has exaggerated titles for views, but this highlights a very, very big problem that, as you'll soon see, is a picture-perfect direct comparisons to the problems with the economy right now. Obviously, there mathematically cannot be 7 rank 1 players. I'm sure they're all great players, but only one guy can be rank 1. And when you try to make everything rank 1 itself loses its meaning and prestige. We see this exact same problem in the world of sports where, for example, fans like to rank their top 10 NBA players of all time. There are so many great players who could have a case to be in the top 10. So what ends up happening is that people keep adding their new favorite players into the top 10, and before you know it, their top 10 players list now has 15 guys in it. And I'm sorry, but numerically speaking, a top 10 list cannot have 15 guys in it. In order to have an actual, honest, objective list, you have to be willing to have the uncomfortable conversation of, if you're going to add someone new into the top 10, you then have to kick out someone who's currently there. It's not fun, it's not good vibes, it's much easier and more comfortable to just say, hey, everybody gets to be in the top 10. but then you end up just ruining the competitive integrity of what it actually means to be top 10 in the first place. Now, in the world of sports and video games, this good vibes complacent way of thinking isn't necessarily going to ruin your day, but when it comes to the real world and solving real world problems, this way of thinking is going to have everyone counterproductively chasing their own tails for decades on end without getting anywhere near a solution. And this is pretty much what every millennial solution is. We all know that a college degree isn't worth anywhere near what it used to be in terms of helping you get a job in this absolute hellscape of a job market. Boomers hardcore shoved the college path down the throats of their millennial and Gen Z children because back in their day, a college degree guaranteed a good job. What they didn't realize is that it guaranteed a good job back then, specifically because not everyone had one. And now what we have seen happen is the exact same thing you see when you have 7 guys who are the rank 1 rogue or 15 guys in your NBA top 10. Rank 1, top 10, and a college degree all lose their meaning and integrity at that point. Now, this isn't anything new. We all know boomer logic is dumb, but for a millennial generation who they themselves got so viciously screwed over by this boomer advice, you'd think they'd learn their lesson and start looking for different types of solutions. But no, somehow they're not. Somehow they're just building and evolving the same bad boomer advice that already screwed them over. I was talking to a millennial friend of mine the other day about my YouTube channel and the type of content I make, and naturally we got into a conversation about the economy. Hey guys, we noticed something very interesting in the YouTube analytics recently. It appears that the single most important metric for the long-term success of a video isn't actually likes or clicks, it's actually how many people end up subscribing. So, if you found this video important and useful, the best thing you can do to help us get the message out is to simply subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you all so much, guys. We really, truly appreciate it. First off, he finally acknowledged that college is indeed a zero-sum game scam. About time, finally, we noticed. But after that, he told me that you could still make it today if you work hard because there are other ways to make it outside of college. He told me that one of his friends started off as a typical minimum wage worker at McDonald's, but then he worked really hard, got promoted to manager, and then kept climbing the corporate ladder, and now he has a pretty decent higher paying management position job. And his advice is just work harder wherever you are, because even if you're a minimum wage McDonald's worker, that can be you. Except that can't be you. Not all of you anyways. Just like the rank 1 player and the top 10 NBA all-time list, there is a limited, finite amount of higher paying manager positions, and it's just straight up a numerical fact that not everyone can be manager, no matter how hard they work. Sure, this advice could work individually for one single person, but it's not a solution on a macro, societal-wide level. If everyone works harder to become manager, all that's going to happen is, number 1, it's going to be much harder to become manager in the first place, and number 2, still only one guy is going to become manager in the end, and everyone else will have just worked harder for absolutely nothing. Well, not for nothing exactly. For more corporate profits for McDonald's for sure, but nothing at all, no reward for himself. And we're seeing different iterations of the same problem play out in literally every millennial proposed solution to the economy. After college degrees in general clearly lost their legitimacy, most of my fellow millennials gave the brilliant advice of, well, you can't just get any college degree, you need to get an in-demand degree like computer science, learn to code. And once again, what ended up happening was the exact same thing that happens when you have 7 rank 1 rogue players or 15 guys in your NBA top 10. More people learn to code. More people get computer science degrees. But the number of available jobs stays the same, and in fact is even shrinking now due to AI. And the end result is that not everyone gets a better job. It's that the job market itself gets oversaturated and the degree once again becomes useless. Speaking of AI, a lot of young Gen Zers understandably hate AI now because of how much harder it's made it for them to get their first entry-level job. What's the millennial solution for this? oh, just get into the trades and learn to become a plumber. And now we're already starting to see the exact same oversaturation happen in the trades as well. That all being said, why is it that millennials keep defaulting to different variations of the same boomer advice that already didn't work out for them? It should not be that hard to figure out that there can't be millions of computer science grads in a market with only thousands of available jobs. I think, once again, it comes down to comfort, complacency, and a lack of balls. I think they'd rather sit on their hands and twiddle their thumbs all day, continuing to live in the delusional fantasy land that boomers created, where everyone can make it if they just work hard. They didn't create the problem, but they've been passively sitting around and not doing anything to solve the problem for decades now. And my question to all my fellow millennials watching is this. You all remember the 2008 financial crash. We were told it was supposed to be a temporary 6-month recession before everything went back to normal. Instead, it ended up permanently screwing over our entire generation for life. And now, not only has it screwed over our entire generation, it screwed over the entire generation that came after us as well. How many more generations are we going to sit by and watch this happen to before we finally get our shit together, grow a pair, and be willing to have these uncomfortable conversations about actual serious solutions? And not just these shallow, feel-good boomer iterations of just get a better job. What millennials fundamentally have to understand now is that getting a better job is a zero-sum game. If you get a better job, somebody else doesn't. That's the cold hard truth we're all living in, experienced, and have to admit at some point. It might work as advice on an individual level. It cannot work on a macro societal wide level for everyone. In order to actually impact meaningful change, we have to start talking about actual sweeping radical changes to the system itself instead of just telling everybody to just get a better job. Since millennials were too comfortable and complacent to fight for any actual real solutions, this has resulted in something very sad for the next generation, Gen Z. Gen Z is obviously very wise and mature beyond their years, and they're essentially the generation that actually gives me hope for the future. They've essentially skipped their entire early 20s adulthood phase that almost everybody goes through. They're not drinking, not partying, not dating, or chasing girls, and they've directly skipped to the phase in life where they're fighting for political and economic revolutionary change. And while this is very inspiring to see, it's also very sad in a way because, well, you just shouldn't have to be worried about the fate of the world in your hands in your early 20s. Gen Z deserves to have a young adulthood where they get to enjoy their youth just like every other generation. Instead, because millennials were too complacent to do anything, Gen Z has now been forced to take on the mantle and address all the problems of the world head on, when they really should be partying away their youth right now, or at least have the option to do so. You know those dysfunctional families where the parent is some sort of alcoholic drug addict, and as a result, the teenage kid is forced to grow up fast and take on the role of the parent? Well, that's kind of what the Gen Z millennial relationship dynamic really feels like right now. We, the millennials, are the ones who really should be fighting for change and fixing all the problems the boomers created, but instead, we're too busy getting drunk and intoxicated off our drug of choice of good vibes and complacency. It's really not fair, and it's really not right. But at last, there is some hope here. Unlike the baby boomers who are officially entering their 80s this year, millennials are still a pretty young generation, all things considered, and are far from irredeemable. And despite my overall negative and extremely critical tone in this video, I do still believe there are some positive, redeeming qualities about my generation if we manage to harness correctly, can really influence some serious positive change alongside Gen Z. First, there are what I would call the millennial stragglers. These are the minority, I'd say about 1 out of every 10 millennials or so, who are more like Gen Z and are extremely bold and vocal about all the problems we need to fix within the system. And I would say more and more millennials every day are gradually finally starting to shift into this camp, as all the problems at this point are getting harder and harder to ignore and deny. Now, if this is you, I would say to you that if you ever thought of running for a public office as a way to influence change, your time is now. There are more and more millennials winning significant positions of power than ever before. And after the last disastrous 10 years of boomer presidencies from both parties, there is more appetite for youth, new voices, and new change than ever before. It is really on us at this point to run for and implement changes on a government, societal-wide level. Although I personally think Gen Z is ready to lead, there's still some stigma around electing people under the age of 30 into public office positions, and so for now, we need to finally step up. Although millennials fail to create meaningful, impactful change, I don't actually think we're incapable of it. I really don't. We did turn out in droves to get the first black president elected. Twice. We did stage a noble, albeit short-lived Gen Z-esque protest in Occupy Wall Street, in which I talked about in my last video. And I think, to be fair, part of what happened back then was that the world just wasn't ready for these sweeping changes yet. And so a lot of millennials sort of just got jaded, gave up, and went back to this complacent, just get a better job mindset. Just become a part of the problem instead of actually, solving the problem. While the world wasn't quite ready for radical changes back then, it certainly is today with the revolutionary changes Gen Z is literally igniting everywhere right now. And if we were able to come up just a bit short back then when we were totally on our own, imagine what we could do right now with a full-on Gen Z millennial coalition. We could vote every boomer out of office tomorrow. We could end their political and economic power in an instant. We could reshape society, businesses, and governments to work for us in the way we want. And we don't just have to continue going along accepting that this is the way things are and the way they have to be. We really, really don't. So please, my fellow millennials out there, we have the full force of the revolutionary young Zoomers on our side now. This isn't 2008 anymore. The world has changed. And if we can just get our shit together, start having the serious, uncomfortable conversations we've always avoided, start taking leadership roles, and do everything in our power to support Gen Z, I promise you, a Gen Z and Millennial alliance would be absolutely unstoppable. And we could finally take the first step in fixing all the problems the boomers created and start building a better world for everyone.